What you're looking at here are two visualisations. They're both based on UK property transaction data from 2024, and together they answer two very important questions. So where leasehold properties are concentrated and when different types of transactions actually happen. Let's start with this graph first. This map style visualisation breaks down the country into smaller areas. Each cell shows how many leasehold transactions happened in 2024. The colour scale is key here. Lighter colours mean fewer leasehold sales, and darker colours, more intense colours, mean higher volumes. So straight away you're not just looking at averages, you're looking at actual transaction concentration. Now if we take a step back and look at the overall pattern, then we can see that leasehold is not evenly spread. It's not even close. Instead it's highly clustered. You get certain pockets where leasehold transactions are very dense and large areas where they're relatively limited. This tells us something fundamental about the UK property market in 2024. Leasehold is location dependent and not universal. Now if we think about why that might be, leasehold properties are typically associated with flats and apartments, higher density developments, urban areas and new build schemes. So naturally areas with more urban density, more development, more flats will show up as darker, more intense zones on this map. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Some areas clearly have high leasehold penetration, others are dominated by freehold houses, lower density stock, more traditional housing, things like that. So in this first graph alone we can say that in 2024 leasehold activity was concentrated, not evenly distributed, and that has real implications. If you're investing in property, you can't assume that tenure behaves the same everywhere. Some markets are heavily leasehold, others are overwhelmingly freehold. But that affects yields, management complexity, legal structure and long-term strategy. Now that deals with the where. Let's move on to the when. We now consider graph 2. This is when transactions happen across years including 2024. The second graph looks completely different, but it's answering a complementary question. Here we've got a grid of months across multiple years. Each row represents a year, and each column represents a month, from January through to December. Each circle shows how many transactions happened. The size of the circle represents freehold transaction volume, and the colour intensity represents leasehold transaction activity. So now instead of geography, we're looking at time and structure together. Let's focus on the most recent row, which is 2024. What happened in 2024 was that when you look across the months, something stands out immediately. The market is not flat. Certain months clearly have larger circles and some have much smaller ones. And this tells us that transaction activity in 2024 was seasonal. Typically you see stronger activity around late winter, early spring, mid-year and sometimes into early autumn. And then the quieter periods like early January, the late summer dips and year-end slowdowns. Now if we combine that with the colour intensity, you notice leasehold activity doesn't just follow volume, it has its own pattern as well. Some months show strong freehold activity but relatively lower leasehold intensity. Other months show more balanced or stronger leasehold presence. This tells us something subtle but important. Different property types don't always move in sync. Flats and leasehold properties may be more influenced by development cycles, investor demand or specific market conditions, whereas freehold houses tend to reflect broader underlying market activity. Putting both graphs together, now this is where it gets really interesting. The first graph told us that leasehold is geographically concentrated. The second graph tells us that transactions are seasonally driven. And if we put those together, then you can get a much more complete picture of the 2024 market. One of the key insights being location and timing. So if you look at the leasehold heavy areas, they're not just different in structure, they also behave differently through time. For example, urban leasehold heavy markets may respond differently to interest rates, investor sentiment, affordability changes, and we can compare this to suburban or freehold dominated areas. Another insight is that not all volume is equal. Just because a month has high transaction volume, this doesn't mean it's evenly split across the property types. Some months might be house heavy, others might be more balanced. So if you're analysing the market using just total transactions or average price, you're missing the structure underneath. Another key insight is that the leasehold market is not one market. One of the biggest misconceptions is treating leasehold as a single category. This data shows clearly that leasehold behaves differently depending on location, timing and market conditions. So saying leasehold is doing X is often too simplistic. This matters because most property data is presented in a very simple way. Things like average price, monthly change, national trends. But those numbers don't show the whole picture. They don't show where activity is concentrated, when it happens, or how different property types behave. These visuals do. They show structure, timing and distribution as well, which is what really drives outcomes. So the core takeaways from these insights is that if we boil this down into different practical insights, we can state that leasehold is highly location specific. You need to analyse areas individually. The market is seasonal. Timing affects liquidity and execution. Freehold and leasehold behave differently. They respond differently to conditions. Volume alone isn't enough. You need to understand what's driving it. What these two graphs show very clearly is this. The property market isn't just about price. It's about where activity is concentrated, when transactions happen, and how different types of property behave. In 2024, those patterns were structured, uneven, and highly dependent on both location and timing. So once you start looking at property data like this, you stop asking what's happening to prices, and instead you start asking how is the market actually moving. Please get in touch if you have any data related property requirements. I'm able to analyse millions of transactions of property data and glean all kinds of insights from this. Thanks for listening. See you next time.